is there are 5 situations on the slide. Which out of these would be considered to be a modification of lease under Ind AS 116? Okay, I am getting a few votes. And let me read it out for the benefit of those who are using a mobile phone to access this webinar. The first option is 10,000 square feet of space was leased at inception. Subsequently, another 2,000 square feet was also leased. The other situation is 3 floors of office space was leased at inception, and subsequently 1 floor out of the 3 was given up. The third situation is 10,000 square feet of space was leased at inception for 3 years. At the end of the first year, the lease was extended for 2 more years. The fourth situation is 3 floors of an office space was leased at a rent of 15 lakhs a month. The rental was subsequently renegotiated to 12 lakh rupees a month. The last situation is an asset was leased for 3 years with an option to extend it by another 3 years. At the beginning, based on considering the facts of the way the business was operated, the lessee said the lease term is 3 years. At the end of the first year, the lessee thought, well, I have a choice to extend it by another 3 years. Let me extend this to 3 more years. Yeah, responses are trickling in. 80% of us on the webinar have polled. Let me end the polling. Oh, we are getting more responses. Okay. Let me wait for another 10 seconds and then close the poll. Okay, let's end the polling. All right. Let me quickly share the results. 75% of the participants said, or those who voted, said that the first example is that of a lease. 14% said it's not. 63% said the third example is a modification. 63% said the fourth is a modification. 69% said the fifth is a modification. Okay, let me end the suspense. What does the lease modification accounting require? And then we can think about what answer we give. In simple terms, what does modification mean? Modification means that something was there in the agreement, was agreed between the parties on day one. At a later point in time, the parties decided to change the arrangement. That, friends, is an example of what the standards talk about modification of leases. I know there is also a concept called remeasurement of a lease, which is a new concept and was not there in the old Ind AS 17 or IAS 17. But what that means is, if there is a change in the agreement which was never a part of the agreement to begin with, that is an example of modification. But if there was something in the agreement and circumstances changed, because of which one had to modify the accounting or modify the arrangement, that is a remeasurement under the accounting standard and not a modification. And the accounting impacts of both of those could be different. So now with that in mind, let's look at this example once again. In the first case, we said 10,000 square feet at the beginning, another 2,000 square feet were leased. Now, if this additional lease of 2,000 square feet was not a part of the contract, this is an example of a lease modification. In the second case, we said 3 floors of office space was leased at inception, 1 floor was given up. If the option to give the floor up was not a part of the original contract, then this, friends, is an example of a modification. The third example says 10,000 square feet of space was leased at inception for 3 years. At the end of the first year, the lease was extended by 2 more years. Now, presumably that there was no extension clause when the agreement began, in which case, this, friends, is also an example of a modification of a lease. The next one is 3 floors were leased at a rental of 15 lakhs. It was negotiated down to 12 lakhs per month. Now, if this negotiation was never a part of the contract at the beginning, then this change or change in the consideration is also an example of modification. The last one is where the contract itself had a provision for a lease of 6 years, with 3 years as the primary period or the non-cancelable period, and the next period of 3 months was an option to extend the lease. At inception or at commencement of the lease, the lessee thought, I am not going to go beyond 3 years. But come end of 1 year, the lessee said, this looks to be an attractive proposition. I will extend the lease by another 3 years. In this case, the option to extend the lease was already a part of the contract on day 1. And therefore, example 5 on this slide is not a lease modification.